Order. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Wright.
Speaker, can I rise to speak on the Customs Amendment Anti-Dumping Improvements Bill No. 2, 2011? Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill incorporates 3 sets of changes to Australia's anti-dumping system in an attempt to address some of the numerous concerns among stakeholders with regards to the generally unworkable and current anti-dumping arrangements. Essentially, the purpose of the bill of anti-dumping system is to allow countries to take action against foreign businesses that seek to export or dump product into the market at a price lower than that charged in their home market, or simply lower than the price of production. At heart, this process is little more than a clinical and calculated attempt to exploit Australia's commitment to free trade by artificially distorting the domestic market. It is therefore only right and proper that we have measures in place to stamp it out. However, there are a number of technical impediments to assessing Australia's anti-dumping system, as well as difficulties with how that system is administered. In recent times, there's been a great deal of frustration about the tardiness of investigations and the significant cost imposed on businesses who wish to raise cases for consideration. Bizarrely, the current system has also frequently imposed a greater burden of proof on local industries than it does on foreign competitors. Essentially, as it currently stands, the system is too expensive, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, too slow and too lopsided. Some anti-dumping cases can drag out for years, and at the end of which the damage may have already been done. When rulings are made, they frequently occur too late to reverse the harm that has been caused, not only to the firms directly affected, but also to the wider parts of their supply chains. The legislation under discussion today contains provisions for several things. 1, a new appeals process. 2, the establishment of a trades remedy forum comprised of government, local industry, importers and unions, and new guidelines to allow investigations to be extended into certain circumstances. And by and large, we believe that these changes will help address some of the faults in the system. However, given that one of the main problems with the current arrangements relates to the timelines of investigations, care will need to be taken out to ensure that new provisions for extensions don't result in unnecessary delays in decision-making. The Coalition is also concerned at Labor's reluctance to provide more resources to Customs. Initially, the government said that they would increase staff in the relevant sections of Customs from 31 to 45. However, we have subsequently discovered that these additional staff are not based on new investment, but quite the opposite. And Mr Speaker, I think it's tardy that once again we see the government saying one thing and then in time doing another. I mean, the Achilles heel of the government at the moment is there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead. These additional staff will be based on a redeployment of resources from other areas of Customs. This is an extraordinary decision and will no doubt put additional pressure on Customs Service, which already has plenty on its plate due to the government's ongoing ineptitude in areas of border protection. We've seen similar situations in Asia, with staff being dragged away from their core duties to conduct background checks on the never-ending parade of illegal arrivals. Some of you blokes need to remember that you can only cut the pie into a certain number of pieces before it turns into crumbs. The Coalition's preference, and indeed our policy, is for a genuine increase in the branch resources. We believe that it would allow for stronger interpretations and evidence in prosecuting anti-dumping cases. It would also bring into our system online with those operating in the USA and a number of EU states. The government speaks about the protection of jobs in manufacturing. Mr Deputy Speaker, I suggest that this bill today goes to protecting some of those Australian jobs from anti-dumping. The Coalition's anti-dumping policy released in November of last year is based on increasing the quality of investigations, lowering the cost to participants and providing more scope for the penalties to apply to parties who refuse to cooperate with the authorities. I mentioned earlier the perverse situation that we have where the burden of proof rests more heavily on local businesses rather than the foreign competitors. The Coalition's policy would address this by providing the authorities with the opportunity to make use of the preliminary affirmative determinations for 2 months into an investigation. The preliminary affirmative determinations create a shift in the burden of proof, requiring the foreign producer, rather than the Australian company, that it believes it's been damaged by dumping and proves its conduct hasn't hurt the Australian industry. One industry that comes to mind with reference to anti-dumping is the steel industry. A good colleague of mine, one of Australia's largest privately owned steel merchants, got caught up with 18 million tonne of steel being dropped on the docks from a Chinese manufacturer. Thank you, the provisions in place. Thanks heavens that the provisions were in place whereby BHP or one at BlueScope were able to put an interim action on that anti-dumping action by a Chinese mill, which prohibited that stock getting to the marketplace and basically destroying the steel industry overnight. The concept of interims is when the provision provides under the Act for someone who believes that anti-dumping, that there's a case for anti-dumping in their sector. It provides for them for the product on the dock to be quarantined, and that an evaluation of the difference in the price between what it's landed for and the so-called production price is, and then that money is then quarantined and then put to the side until a determination on the anti-dumping outcome can be made by the relevant authorities. But under the Coalition's plan, greater financial resources and specialist anti-dumping investigators would ensure decisions are made in a timely fashion, providing greater certainty to all involved. Unsurprisingly, Labor jumped on our proposal and accused us of being in breach of the WTO agreements. It should come as no surprise, Mr Deputy Speaker, that these allegations were completely false. Not only were the preliminary affirmative decisions consistent with the WTO's provisions, but they are consistent with what Labor was actually advocating for just a few months before. I imagine that it must have been quite embarrassing.
Order. It being 8 p.m, the debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 34.